All right, welcome back to the program. Lanre Oshibano is joining me right now. Lanre is the founder and the chief executive officer of Foresight Group. He was a former senior special assistant to the president on technology. Welcome, Lanre. And we were just saying during the break, why did it take you so long? What happened for you not to be on this program? What exactly is it?
I think fatigue for for being on media.
For media.
Yeah, but on second thought, there is a need for us to preach this gospel about what we all need to do, which we'll delve into some of the conversation. But what we need to do in really championing the opportunity that digital economy brings for us in terms of productivity, extension of markets, and a number of other things. But there's a lot of work we have to do as a country.
That brings me to the question. We're talking about digital economy in Nigeria. And you know, what comes to my mind really is that digital economy is about, for me, it's about economy, it's about business, it's about money, you know. Coming from connections, you see gadgets, transactions, check out even our financial system. Right now, payment system, you don't need to give me cash and all of that, and all that is hinged on the digital space that has made this possible. The first question to you really is that, does Nigeria fit the definition of a digital economy? I hope it's not a hard question, but does Nigeria really fit that description of a digital economy?
No, it isn't. It isn't a hard question at all. Okay. And we need to quit the vibes and we need to really face the reality. And the reality is that, yes, we are drawing that circle that you can reference as a digital circle, but it's still not completed. You know, maybe we're 30% there in terms of what we need to be able to build what a digital economy is, and a robust one indeed. And I think, you know, I'm going to try and speak to certain things that hopefully people can take away as the need to support the required investment to be able to actually, because some might look at it, you know, just a techie thing or a techie conversation, but it's actually much more than that. When we speak to corporate executives around the need to do a digital transformation project, part of what we say to them is, it's not an IT. Don't look at it from an IT perspective. Look at it like a complete business change, a complete business transformation. So imagine that from a corporate perspective. Now, layer that on a society like Nigeria, on a nation like Nigeria. But if you look at the corporate environment, it's changing how you do your business, it's changing how you interact with your customers, it's changing the culture even of the business. So it's not just an IT. IT is the enabler of it. But let's come back to, so where are we in terms of being a digital economy? The key pillars are the internet, which talks to infrastructure. Do we have the infrastructure? We've lacked a great deal in terms of infrastructure. And the iterations that brought us this far, you know, we started with, I came into technology, advent of personal computers. In the corporate organizations were now having, everybody was having a computer, now you have an iPad. But then, and then there was the old internet, people were building websites, and we saw companies that came into the play, like the Amazon and many others, lastminute.com, they built a website, and the Web 1.0. But all those other nations that are robust today were building those infrastructure. And Nigeria, you know, if you look back almost 20 years ago, there was the old clamor for e-government. But we have lacked, because when we say the infrastructure, it's the prerequisite to actually be able to build all of this fantastic digital economy. Then the other aspect is, of course, the big business in the system, the public sector. Digitizing the public sector, which is where the biggest data lies. There's the authority in terms of data is the one that holds all this data, because the data, you know, so data is should I say, the oil within this digital economy. So the richness of the data that sits in the private sector, that needs to be digitized, and that in itself brings about immense gains. And then, of course, a critical aspect, which is now a major challenge for us, is the skills, is the talent to actually drive a robust digital economy, the people that will use it, the people that will build it. And of late, you know, because we haven't acted, of late, economies that understand the competition that technology brings are taking talented young people. So this whole Japa syndrome is not a one-way situation. It's not like, oh, someone just wants to go to England or go to Dubai or go to America or Canada. There's a demand for it.
Those countries are strategic.
Absolutely.
They are looking for the skilled workers, and now
absolutely,
IT.
absolutely. Now, it's not a sorry tale at the end of it, but we need to get our act together, because I think we've missed out in, talk about the fourth industrial revolution, second industrial revolution, third industrial revolution. We missed out. We're still having challenges with power. Must we miss out on the opportunities that the fourth industrial revolution brings about? I hope not, because the tools or the resources to make it happen is one of the things that we have, a young population.
Okay, that brings me to the question, what you've said now, potentials. And, living here in the country has made me hate that word, seriously. Whether not hate, but dislike, or actually hate, because Nigeria is a country of potential. Come on, guys, I don't want to hear that.
There's a fatigue of that.
Yes, I'm actually fatigued. Because I know that we have what it takes to grow from that potential, to exponential growth. Now, from what you've said, what do you think are the greatest obstacles that are really inhibiting why we can't really leapfrog?
I'm going to just say...
And those forces behind it.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's a simple thing. I think we just lack the capacity to organize ourselves. It's that simple.
Organize in what terms?
So, very good question. So, we're a very reactive society. We react. And even when we react, we don't actually take the stock and actually then fully react. But we just react and we put vibes out and everyone is excited. But then we miss the point. We miss the point around what is required. We need to, certain things that we must do. We must, put infrastructure in place. Because part of the dangers of the excitement that comes with the digital economy is that there's already a gap, in a digital gap or technology gap. That will be further, broadened, expanded, if we do not get this right. We will have some part of the people that will never even be able to participate. You talk of financial inclusion. If there's no financial inclusion, then, there's a challenge of economic activity. So some people will be economically excluded. And, when we say we're 200 million, what we're speaking to is the number of the population. But if we're excluding, 80% of the population and only 20%, if at all, even if it's up to 20%, are productive, we're not meeting the targets that we need to meet. So the beauty of, again, why we are preaching and pushing the conversation around digital economy is that it's one way by which you can bring about more inclusivity, you can bring about more participation, you can bring opportunities to people to extend market. Like I said, we are drawing that circle, and I can give you examples. Look at the young people today that on a good day, they don't have to have a market stall, they don't have to pay rent, but they can now use the likes of Instagram, the likes of Twitter to sell their wares, to e-commerce. Again, they will have been able to do more, if we have a proper credit system in place, because we have a proper, robust digital identity, so you can identify people. So credit will flow. A society that it doesn't have credit, it's not going to grow. So there are opportunities that we're missing, and it comes back to what I said about we are missing those key core ingredients: infrastructure, the public sector digitization, critical, absolutely critical. And then the skills. The skills is absolutely critical. Listen, if you look at the history of mankind, science and tech as what has enabled mankind to advance. Science and tech needs to be like the regular word. It needs to be the regular curriculum for every young person.
So you're talking about the digital literacy skills.
Absolutely.
Or digital education.
Digital education.
That will come from, do you think STEM education is just it alone?
In fact, almost like it should be mandatory, such that whilst you don't have to become a startup founder or an innovator, but when you are in the midst of that conversation, you understand what is going on. You understand the desire for innovation. You understand the desire for creativity. You understand the desire for entrepreneurship. You see, what is amazing is that we have some of the innate abilities that drive some of these things, but we need to it needs to propagate across the people, so that, I admire the creative sector, especially in the entertainment industry, what they have done for themselves, what they have done for themselves. Yeah. But there's a lot lacking. We still have foreign companies being able to sell the music. We still have foreign companies being able to push their market reach. These are the things that we need to be doing for ourselves. Today, I'll give you a good example. If you look at, if you want to use any of this social media that we talk about, you're using a foreign company.
Yeah.
And this was because we never acted when people were building the Web 1.0, the Web 2.0 that gathered data. We're onto another phase with the evolution of the Web 3. Are we going to wait again for someone to come and build these things? And for us to now, again, we're dependent on these new innovations. One thing we've shown with the startup, which is exciting for me, is capacity, is ability, that we can build companies, indigenous companies, built by Nigerians, and I can attract serious, significant amount of money. Now, what that means is that, listen, why are we not exporting software? Why are we not building these solutions that will be exported even in our region? Let's own West Africa. Let's own Africa. So that's what excites me about what the possibilities. That's what excites me about, and the gains for us. Cheap labor force.
Because I was coming to the opportunities that the digital economy portends, and you just raised a very valid point, which is Nigerians, a lot of us that are tech savvy and all of that, we are on social media, for example, but we are on foreign-owned social media.
Indeed.
Can we get like a Nigerianized Twitter, for example? Can we get a Nigerianized Facebook? Can we get a Nigerianized WhatsApp? The potential is there to build it because our boys and ladies are really doing well. They are building and innovating.
Absolutely.
So what exactly is it that we are not seeing as much as we should see, like in that space? Are we also ready as a people to embrace those things when they come up and say, no, it's just, this type of made in Nigeria, made in Nigeria.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you are now of that generation of made in China. But then, China's...
I try now to do made in Nigeria.
No, but what I'm saying is that there was a time when you say...
When I show you my handbag, my handbag, a few of my colleagues saw that day. When I see this your handbag, I was like, oh, this is a made in Nigeria. What?
Yeah.
I was like, I had to...
Yeah, no, sorry, but the point I was trying to make was that, it's in our generation that we used to hear of made in China, and it wasn't popular.
Yes.
But guess what? Made in China is the way to go. So, again,
Yeah.
it comes back to what I said about we must organize ourselves. We need to develop almost like a Marshall Plan. And, there's a lot of these acts and bills, and I think we just need to develop a Marshall Plan, understanding where we want to get to. If we can build, so the guys that have been able to take advantage of fintech, and don't forget that fintech had existed also in Southeast Asia. When you look at Bangladesh and all of that, they'd used it to close the gap for economic inclusion and financial inclusion. So the guys have seen an opportunity and they built it. So it shows that we can build these things. And I can tell you, I'm in conversations with a number of people across the world. A major part of them are Nigerians, and they're already innovating in metaverse. I don't know where metaverse is going to portend. I don't know where it's going, but they're already playing in that space, in the fashion space, in the old creative sector. Those are the ones that are always eager to adopt, the first adopters of new technology. In the art especially, you're already having conversations in the sports industry around the NFTs and all of that. But the point I'm making is that it shows that we can build this thing if we decide to. Listen, Nancy, if we focus on just the African market, that's a 1.4 billion market. Let's just focus on that. We have the AFC, FTA, and the likes to support these things. Let's focus on that. The rest of the world will actually looking to us, and they will come. And this point is also where, as part of really organizing ourselves, is how do we fund? That's the other aspect that we need to look at. I don't know if I'm jumping your questions.
Yes, you're jumping.
But
you can. No, before we come to the funding aspect, because I have a few more questions on the funding, but let's stick with the startup a bit, which you've talked about, because I know that at least recently we've seen that startups, or the word startup is really a buzzword these days. Everyone, I'm a startup founder. Can you just even elaborate about the startup relating to the I've interviewed a lot of startups.
Yes.
Founders.
Yeah.
Those that have gotten seed capital, Series A.
Indeed.
And all of that. So can you just speak to me about all of that? And even the funding part of it.
Part of it, yes. I think in a nutshell, the whole idea of startup is the fact that it's just growth rate. The fact that it's a phenomenal growth rate in a very short space of time. And particularly most of the time, it's building what is more like an idea that in itself not necessarily generating revenue, but you can see where it's going to, right? And there's a whole excitement around the startup space. In Nigeria, there's so much gap. If you look at the education sector, without a shadow of a doubt, we're not going to solve the problem with education in bricks and mortar, unless we're just trying to bury our heads in the sand. It's going to be by solutions that are going to come out of the ed tech. And we're seeing snippets of them, you know, and that's an area to focus on. I think that's, so I suspect that will be the next big boom after the old fintech. The fintech, we all know the challenges that exist in the industry. You know, I know the regulators have had difficult times, but they come into play. They're actually working closely with that sector, trying to bring sandboxes to start hopefully innovating and building solutions. Because again, this is where we must play a part. You know, I've seen how evolution of technology has played out. You know, some will say crypto has no future, some will say crypto has a future. I'd rather stay with the fact that it has a future, so that I can lead in that future, rather than say, no, it has no future. And then when that future comes, it's offered to me by somebody else. So I would rather put investment in that and use our talents, so that our talents are not going elsewhere and having to solve this problem. You know, Nigeria is said to be one of the most users of crypto, but it's not literally for transactions, just P2P. But imagine what we can do in the blockchain space, you know, what we can do in terms of digitizing land use, you know, whereby you can digitize a land use in a state, for example, and because you can work with the government and you can decide what land is allocated towards the residential, farming, warehouse, whatever, then you can start attracting funding for land where families sit on today, and they're poor families, but they're sitting on an asset. So you can extract value out of that. I mean, these are the tremendous opportunities that this space allows us. And so in terms of the startups, I think one of the areas that I would like to see is more high net worth participation, which is happening, but a lot more, to support the startups, so that we're not having a lot of startups going for early stage funding from foreign investors. And the ways that we can do all of those things. And we already, you know, we are pushing that narrative and we're pushing that conversation heavily. The other aspect is that, I mean, I would like to see a startup fund. You know, I've heard people talk about let's list, you know, our startups, the ones that have made a lot of money. Let's list them on Nigeria NGX. But I'm not so sure, because that could just be where, you know, you come and dump it. I would rather list a fund that goes in that early stage, so that when the gains come, there's benefit for those that own asset in that fund. So a fund that can invest across, following proper scrutiny, proper criteria, can invest across different startups. Because it's a bit of a gamble, the startup investment. You know, you put 10 on the table, you might come out with just 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. However, it pays immensely, and it justifies all of the risk, as we've seen. And of course, you know, a whole lot of effort goes into ensuring that the quality of those startups that you invest into have real potential to be successful. Again, if we open up the space, I mean, imagining the credit lending in the health sector, in the insurance sector, we can build successful companies out of this. But again, you know, like I said, a critical aspect is that public sector digitization, the digitalization of that public sector. It's just absolutely critical.
Okay, still talking about startups in Nigeria. I know we have a few that have really done well and are making us proud that because of them, the world hears about us. But I want you to rate us with our counterparts, other African countries, such as South Africa, such as Kenya, and rate us in the area of perhaps business climate, in the area of workers' experience, in the area of even connectivity, and all of that. How are we doing?
It's unfortunate, because I think the young lads are doing extremely well. You know, they are owning their own. But we also have a large market, you know, so that in itself works in our favor. However, the challenges does exist, you know, challenge around policy, which I think because of advocacy, because of engagement, that is changing, but it needs to change faster. There needs to be a deliberate attempt to say we are together on this journey, as opposed to you over there, I'm over here. This is one of the reasons why the Nigerian Digital Economy Summit that we drive is for really this advocacy, this collaboration. There's no way we can divorce the public sector from the private sector, or one from the other. We must literally collaborate to win in this competition. So, you know, I think Kenya, they have their challenges, but, you know, things are much better. Smaller economy. South Africa is doing very well, but we've raised more money, no doubt. And for, you know, our people are more entrepreneurial, more aggressive. It's a larger market. But imagine if things were full cycle. it would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because again, I think the last time I looked at the figure was about 7 billion or so, or 7 billion we've raised. Look at South America, Ecuador, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia. You know, they're raising, and the 7 billion is entire Africa. That they've raised possibly close to 16
And Nigeria has
billion.
more share in that African component.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. So I will, I will take the
capital.
competition to South America and say, why are we not raising 16 billion? You know, that means that we can raise 16 billion. We can raise 20 billion. But there's a whole lot that needs to happen. And even though, you know, what I'm excited about is despite the fact that people kind of, you know, almost like a slowdown in the startup funding, but Nigeria's team seems to, the steam is still there, it's still going forward. But there's a big, we mustn't get complacent. We mustn't just think the job is done. I think.
Do you think we're getting complacent?
I hope not. I hope not. You know, these are just our poster child, poster children, you know, and what we now need to do is use that as a reference point to want this to happen. You know, we run an accelerator program that's supposed to just really focus on women. It's to bring more people. So not everyone needs to be a founder eventually, but get them into that system. So some of them become good engineers. Some of them become that support system, even for a startup. You know, so we need to, it needs to become, you know, how do we make Nigeria Jerusalem of technology or Mecca of technology, whereby you want to go to Africa or you want to look for talent, you come to Nigeria.
We have a lot to do. For example,
A whole lot.
Kenya has more coding schools than us. Talking
Absolutely.
about the education you're talking about earlier on. So what does, or how does this really come into play? Because I know that the president launched the National Digital Economy Policy some time ago. How does it really come into place now with all of this that we're talking about? There is also a startup bill that the presidency did pass to the National Assembly. I don't think the president has signed it.
I'm not sure. I don't think it's been assented to yet.
Yes, he has not assented to it yet. So how does all this play out? Because, for example, the startup bill, the executive says, oh, it will be one of the best things that had happened. By the side to 5G, we were talking about infrastructure earlier on, 5G approved, you know, some MTN and co and all of that, perhaps by December and all of that. So put all of this in perspectives for me.
I'll just say we need to be deliberate and intentional. You know, it's great to sign these things, but we have to be deliberate and intentional about it, that we want to do it. I remember the time when I was in government, I championed the old digital identity, and I believed that we'll be able to ramp it up and get it done within 4 years. Register all Nigerians. Well,
Are you disappointed?
Extremely. Without a doubt, I am. Because I think that is a soft infrastructure. It's extremely critical. And I think there's still also the challenge around the hard infrastructure. So the old broadband aspect. Is 5G what we need right now? You know, it's the $1 million question. We need ubiquitous broadband, mobile broadband. Fiber broadband into homes. That's what we need. We have to be. I think the point I will make is that we have to be very intentional. We have to be deliberate. We shouldn't play politics around these things. That I think that's where our biggest gain and biggest growth will come from. The productivity. I mean, that's an 11 trillion estimated 11 trillion economy. It extends your market reach. It gives you a whole new market. It brings about productivity, which is one of the biggest things we lack today. We are an unproductive society, extremely unproductive. We need to become really productive, and we need to drive it. We need to create competition, because if not, we're on the edge of a precipice here. And what worries me, as much as, and it's not gloom and doom, but what worries me is, yes, we have a massive number going abroad, but we must build a society that can attract them back.
Yeah.
And that means that we must do these things that we're saying, so that, yes, they go get talent, but they are attracted back, because, hey, hang on, that's where it's happening. When, I like that when Tim Cook said, there was asked a question, in America, why do you go to China? Why do you go make your things in China? We're trying to compete with these guys. And he said, because they have the talent. Talent is just all over the place in China. So I think that's the other area that we must focus on. And we must create an environment that supports innovation. And it means that these other things are in place. There's no way any private sector is going to be able to digitize the government. Sorry, I mean, they can't force it. the government must decide to want to digitize the government's, the public sector space, and understanding the gains that is to be heard from doing such, and especially deliberately working with the private sector.
Now, how should they achieve that? You know, so that it's not as if public sector is looking at, or is this private sector guys? You know, and private sector guys are looking at this lazy public sector people that are not ready to change.
You're right.
Yeah, so
You're
how
right.
do you bring that? How do you bring both? And create that synergy.
You justify the reason why we run this advocacy platform of Nigeria digital economy. It's really to bring together these parties and start really forming a coalition and a force. Because for us to win, and as I said earlier, the public and the private sector must collaborate. And they must collaborate in the sense that there's a clear understanding of we want to lead in this space. So we want to lead in this space, and you guys have the ability, you have the competence, we own this thing, and part of that is almost in your funding research and development. So you're getting private sector to build solutions. If we build solutions out from the private sector as part of any aspect of the public sector, it's a solution that you can end up selling, and that is income. So there's a big picture. I remember the story of Huawei. And before Huawei, there was Notel, for whoever remembers. Yeah. There was Motorola. Yeah. There was even Cisco. There was a deliberate attempt to compete in the infrastructure space, and the Huawei was funded. And today, through the government, but it was funded as a private entity. And Huawei is literally number one across the world today, in my lifetime, right? So these things are doable. I'm not even saying we need to necessarily compete in the hardware space, because that's a long shot. I don't want to boil the ocean. Let's boil the swimming pool instead. But let's win in innovative software solutions. Let's become the country that you look at and say, we've built CRM solutions, we've built fantastic solutions that digitizes data here, and you will not need to preach to the diaspora. They will come themselves, because there is excitement, there is activities going on. Okay. And that's where we need to be. That
brings me, we have about 4 minutes. I'm looking at my time, 4 minutes to the end of this interview. That brings me to the question around if we're already seeing a bubble in the tech sector that is pushing valuations up, and perhaps how inflation is also impacting investment, which you talked about earlier. You talked about investments, how has it impacted making investment, especially in the digital economy space, with looking at foreign exchange issues now, inflation issues, then the issue about even a bubble, because sometimes I look at it even from where I'm seated, I'm like, this tech space or this digital economy space, are we really already in a bubble, or is there a bubble that will burst ahead, or we've not even scratched the surface?
Oh well, there will always be a bubble, but you'll be surprised that the ones I don't know if we're in a bubble yet. Okay. I don't think we've pushed the needle to the point where, because there's still room for immense opportunity, immense growth. But having said that, coming into the .com bubble, there were companies, there are many companies that came about, but there's some of these successful companies today that were created during that bubble, and they're successful today. So it doesn't mean that it kills everything. It just separates the boys from the men. The chaps from the chaps, basically. So I don't think we should focus too much on that, but we must not let this opportunity go. We have missed in Web 1.0, literally. Yeah. We're missed in the second one. We shouldn't miss on this third one.
How about blockchain? Let me ask you about that blockchain metaverse. What prospects?
Immense prospects, and it will happen. Immense. Oh yes, it will happen. It is happening slowly. Yeah. Like I said, I'm in some conversations with different diverse people across the world, but Nigerians are part of that. And the Nigerians that left, there's one young lady in Scotland, and she's building solutions for the fashion industry in the metaverse already. Maybe far-fetched for us in Nigeria, but there are use cases for the blockchain. I talked about the whole land use. There's a use case in that space. I talked about even credit lending has a massive use case. However, a whole lot must come together, because as a private sector, you don't have authority across we can build it over time, but the best person to build is public sector.
Okay. Lastly, and I hope you can answer this in 30 because we've got to go 30 seconds. You've been in the public sector, senior special assistant to the president of technology. Now you're back to private sector, Foresight Group, CEO and founder.
Yes.
Lessons learned? Where would you rather be?
I like where I am now, whereby I understand that there's no friend or foe here. This is about collaboration. This is about, we should quit pointing finger at them and saying, we need to speak truth to power though, but we shouldn't quit. It's not that, they're bad guys or we're good guys or the other way around. Even some private sector folks are, a bit capitalistic. But I think there needs to be collaboration. We need to work together. There must be collaboration between the two parties for us to win. And it has to be about Nigeria winning. It's about Nigeria. How can we become a global leader in technology? And that's the question that should be real for us. And I think we have all that is required. We just need to mix it well, together.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, I've been speaking with Larry Oshibona, who is the founder and chief executive officer of Foresight Group. He was also the former senior special assistant on technology to the president. That's the much we can take. You've heard it from him. We should not, we shouldn't sleep. And all this jackpot, they are taking our skills and they are taking our talent. So we need to be deliberate and intentional. I am Nancy Naji. I'll see you all again tomorrow with another topic, another guest. Be the best you can be that change that you want to see. Bye now.